Talha Baig is a passionate AI and technology expert with a background in computer science, having graduated from Cornell University. After completing his degree, Talha joined Meta as a member of the Marketplace Integrity Machine Learning team, where he spent 3 years working to reduce human, drug, and weapon trafficking. His dedication to responsible innovation and addressing biases in AI systems led him to champion numerous initiatives within the company. In search of a platform to discuss his experiences and insights on AI and technology, Tyler transitioned to hosting the Trust in Tech podcast for the Integrity Institute. With a keen interest in exploring the impact of AI in relationships and the challenges faced by integrity workers in the industry, Tyler engages his listeners to share knowledge of the current AI revolution, AI safety, and emerging technologies. Hello, Tyler. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited. I know I say that with every single person I interview, but I really am because you are in this space. You are doing interviews. You've been in the world of AI, and I like to talk about AI. Also, my initials, so it just works out for me, right?
Yeah, I didn't
But
realize that when I first saw the podcast. I
uh-huh.
didn't realize AI decodes the system. I was like, oh, Amber Ivy. Why couldn't my initials be like that? My initials are tuberculosis. So TB. So that's
Very true.
not all
Blame
of
my
us
parents or thank them.
they had the foresight, I guess.
I guess they figured it out. Or like it was supposed to be something else, but my dad saved the day. So I give him a lot of thanks for that. So, as our listeners know, AI Decodes the System talks about and breaks down topics related to data, technology, policy, and law. So, we're super excited to explore AI and some of its implications with you today. Can you talk a bit about your journey and how you, as a computer science graduate from Cornell, like big deal school, right? How did you end up hosting the Trust in Tech podcast?
So I guess there's multiple places to start. One is why I chose computer science, right? That's the first thing to start is started school. I was an undecided major, and then very frankly, I heard the salaries in the tech industry, and I saw the bill of my college tuition, and I saw
Mm,
the loans that I would get, um, and immigrant parents and everything, right? So you want to make sure you want to uplift your network, right? So computers was where all the money is, and that's where I started to go. So I essentially did all like the nitty gritty technical work. I studied algorithms, data structures, um, operating systems, the hardware, the
hmm
software, whatever you name it, in an official capacity. But what really resonated with me was like service to others or helping others. And I think that was just instilled growing up. It's Ramadan right now too, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And the idea is you're fasting for empathetic reasons, for self-discipline
hmm
reasons, and it's also a month that a lot of Muslims around the world will give charity. So that's also part of the. Which I have enough interesting tangent, which is um, I will not get into.
Or
Maybe
you
later.
can. I'm here for it. If you're willing to, totally open for it.
Okay, the interesting tangent is the charity in Islam is called zakat, and
Okay.
essentially what it's based off of is your assets. So it's not an income
Mm,
tax; it's a
okay.
wealth tax. So I
Interesting.
find that, and now you kind of see wealth tax with Elizabeth Warren advocating for that. So it's an interesting way to see commerce, and the fact that commerce laws existed like 1500 years ago. You're
Right.
like, have we progressed forwards or are we moving backwards? Anyways, so that's the tangent there. But just having a big insight there, and I really rediscovered my love of reading after I left school, and couldn't take as many weird and interesting classes.
Mm,
So I delved really into psychology, philosophy, sociology, data, law, um, fiction as well, whatever you want to call it. And I think the thing for me is I like to talk and I don't like to write as much. and
You're
have a
in you're in the same company.
yep, yep, and I like tangents, as you can just tell. Um, but that's and I was kind of in this headspace for, um, at dinner parties or dinner conversations or at parties
Mhm,
in general, even random birthday parties. I would always be the guy that people were like they kinda, like, turned their ear towards, and they were like,
mm.
"Oh, what the fuck is this guy saying? Like, this is so out of left
Right.
field." But, um, and I've been wanting to start a podcast for a while, and I think, just sharing these thoughts, these insights, I think what I bring to the table, um, somewhat uniquely is and I'm not sure it's very uniquely, is I didn't really specialize in one field. I kind of
Mm,
consider myself a generalist and
mhm.
am able to bring an analogy from one field to another relatively well. I think so. Maybe I could be wrong, but um, and the idea was to bring this for there's also a massive gap in the trust and safety world,
Mm,
or
mhm.
integrity field, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And there was talks about, oh, Facebook is bad because XYZ, or Facebook is good because of XYZ. But there wasn't an
Mhm.
intricate landscape of the picture itself. So that's I kind of wanted to use my expertise that I had at Facebook for removing high harm content
Oh, wow,
and
yeah.
bring that into the podcasting realm. And the goal is to advance the discourse. Essentially, is
Mhm.
give people the window into the conversations being held behind closed doors, and also for the professionals themselves to
Right.
think about their own work in a new way.
I love that, and I think that it's really interesting how you took the work that you were doing at Meta, as well as like what you were learning around the intersection. A lot of times on this show, I talk about the intersection because I'm similar to you in that I play in the world between data, technology, policy, and law. Like those are my things. And when I'm in that intersection and able to talk to those different folks, I just feel really like accomplished and I feel really good about where I am. So I love that led you also to like be able to connect those dots for folks who are in the integrity space. And also, it's super cool that you were an integrity worker. Like we've heard about you folks, like we didn't know who they were. Like there's an idea that there's someone behind the I guess the curtain that's out here making sure that posts pass snuff. So I really want to talk to you about that a little bit next. So, can you tell me about some of the challenges you face as an integrity worker in the AI industry in particular, and how have these experiences influenced your views on the AI revolution? Because I know everyone is wondering.
Yeah, for sure. Let me just tease apart a few things first. So
Oh,
first we'll
please
hit
do.
what's a technology worker, then we'll hit what's the AI industry, and then from there we'll go into the work that we did in AI or AI
Awesome.
industry. So I'll first tease apart what's an integrity worker. So
Hmm.
essentially, an integrity worker is the people that are behind the scenes doing the content moderation, designing the policies, um, understanding what the legal implications are,
Hmm.
understanding what you need to have done for compliance, understanding how to incorporate this into a product that people want to buy or want to use. And there's also, and I was one of those folks, I was an engineer on the marketplace integrity team. So essentially,
Okay.
what I did, yeah. So essentially, what I did was I over the global context of marketplace in general.
Hmm.
I built models in marketplace around 32 different policies that we wanted to enforce against content moderation wise. And I
Oh,
built
nice.
models to automatically pick up against those policies.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so that was what I did. So we used multiple tech. I can kind of go into the challenges now. So essentially, our challenge is that we don't want people putting human exploitation up. We don't want people putting weapons up. We don't
Mm,
want people putting drugs up. We don't want people putting up like scams up. We don't want people putting up, I don't know, like name another policy. So or any
fake
other
news, politics, all the
fake
stuff
news,
that came
politics,
along the
etc.
last couple of
Yeah,
years.
it's a little different for e-commerce, but or
Right.
fake content or scams, right? So
Hmm.
what we and there's no way since marketplace has what, 1 billion users at this point.
Oh yeah.
There's no way we can look at every piece of individual content. So what we want to do there is we want to take we want to essentially use machine learning to
Mm-hmm.
make decisions for us.
Mm.
And though I can kind of go into a quick tangent on how that works as well.
Oh, I would love to
Mm,
hear more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, what we would do is every time a user reports, so essentially you have to build like a flywheel for this. So
Okay.
when a user first reports a product, we send that product out for review to human labelers. They
Mm-hmm.
label a product, it comes back to us, and that's
Mm-hmm.
how you get your initial setup. Is people's reporting
Interesting.
their um, reporting like this violated some policy when you click the
Okay.
report button and don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've
that's how you
clicked
get
it.
yeah, there you go. So that's how you get your initial setup. Then from there, you get a bunch of label data. So once you have certain thresholds of label data, you can do different things. So once you get
Okay.
to around to, let's say, 110,000 label data for a particular policy, um, by that, what I mean is like have 10,000 samples of a pure violation for that policy and
Mm-hmm.
10,000 samples for a non-violation of that policy.
Interesting. Okay. That's a
So
lot. That's great.
yeah, or maybe not 10,000, maybe even more than like that, or like the rest of the
Wow.
inventory. But 10,000, so maybe even 100,000 samples of the non-violation. So for the
Mm-hmm.
non-violation, you would want just like you would. There's ways to do this. So I can go into another thing here, but essentially the way that you choose your samples is basically will determine the bias of the data set. Now every data set
Mm.
will be biased, but for
Right.
example, if you have 100,000 samples in the non-violation data set, the way you construct that,
Okay.
for example, let's go with animals. Let's say someone's selling animals on marketplace, 10,000. Um, let's say you have 10,000 true examples, like these are confirmed animal violations, and you have
Mm-hmm.
100,000 random inventories of marketplace. Maybe someone's selling clothes, maybe someone's selling pet food, someone's selling something
Mm.
else. So your classifier might work, generally speaking, very well on
Okay.
over the marketplace. But it might not be very nuanced because maybe the problematic item isn't um, like clothes. Maybe the problematic item that you're getting a lot of false positives, so you're getting a lot of over enforcement. Is you're also over enforcing on pet food because you're supposed to take
Mm.
down animals. So what you
Ah,
want to do
yeah.
then is then you want to put in pet food into the negative examples too, or the
Okay.
non-violation examples as well, to ensure that you're not going to catch them. Anyways, so once you get
No, I
to
love that. And thank you for breaking it down. Like normally I ask a question where I ask folks to break it down, but you really broke it down the way that most folks can understand. So thank you for that. I
yeah,
didn't
no
realize
worries.
how it worked. So to hear it, I'm like, oh, I get that. Thank you.
I think anyone can get it. I think a lot of this stuff is gate kept. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
academia is gate kept.
Oh, yes.
I think the only difference between me and someone else that's not in the space is that I was lucky, and when you and the halo effect. So essentially, when you're just reinforced that you're doing so well, you're so smart, you're so
Mm-hmm.
hardworking, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera. You kind of just make that your own persona. And
That is
I
so
tutored
true.
a lot of people in high school and college, and what you kind of get from it is. Um, Anyone is capable of understanding anything. It's just a matter of who the teacher is and how you've packaged that information.
So true.
Um, and also, quick digression again is I think a lot of people um, not only gatekeep that information, but they gatekeep it to fend off their own insecurity.
Yeah.
It's a superiority complex essentially, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
I know it, and that makes me special, and because I'm
Mm.
special, you can't know it, right?
Wow.
Or
Yeah.
not. Yeah. So I'm very glad you're doing this podcast, but
I'm glad you're here to talk about these things. This is
yeah,
great.
for sure. So then I kind of went aside, but once you get to 10,000 examples, you can build um, classifier called uh, a decision tree. So a
Mm-hmm.
decision tree is exactly what it sounds like. It's does this listing have let's go with our guns policy. Does this
Mm-hmm.
listing have the weapons keyword? Okay, we went down weapons keyword. Does this listing have like a price over $400? Okay, we go down this one.
Mm.
Does this listing have DM me for more details, right? Uh, which honestly is a really good
Right.
signal into whether
Yeah, it
something
lets
is
you know.
happening. Yeah, 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 for sure, for sure.
Because they should be
Uh,
able to put the whole description in the title unless you're trying to get around, or in
get around it,
the
exactly.
prompt, you're trying to get around it.
Exactly, exactly. So then that's also a really good signal for adversarial content. And by the way, the example I just gave was completely pedagogical. I did
Mhm.
not. I don't. That's not specifically how
Totally
it works
get
in
it.
that case, but that is
Mhm.
generally how it works. So then
Okay.
I'll pivot into neural networks, which you get to around like 100,000 samples.
Mhm.
Um, and that's when you can, and essentially all neural networks are a bunch of weights and biases. So it's just y equals mx plus b on steroids. So if you can draw a line,
Right.
and one side of the line is labeled as positive and the other side of the line is labeled negative, and now you can make that line into in 3D space and 5D space and 6D space and 7D space,
Ah, okay.
and just like contort the line in the space and label one side positive and the other side negative. Congratulations, you
So
built a
cool.
neural network. So why
So
people, I
those
think please do
calculators,
so.
TI-83s, had a purpose.
They had a purpose. They had a purpose. So yeah, I think that's generally how we worked. Or that's the key infrastructure of the problem.
Okay.
Um, just to give a background, the challenges of the
Mhm.
problem are um, a little more nuance is the wrong word. They're just a little more weird, I guess. I don't know have a really
Mhm.
good term for this. Uh,
Okay.
so there's multiple challenges, and honestly, it depends on what the company priority is at the point. During COVID, our team took down a bunch of masks. So because people were price
Mm.
gouging masks, they were price gouging hand
Oh, wow.
sanitizers,
Yeah.
they were selling fake vaccines.
Oh,
India had
wow.
a massive yeah, yeah. So India had a massive oxygen tank escalation at the time.
Mm.
So essentially, yeah, yeah. So essentially, there was a lack of oxygen tanks in India, and they
Right, I
had a
remember hearing about that.
yeah, and they had a massive COVID outbreak.
Mhm.
So people were putting oxygen tanks and fake oxygen tanks up on marketplace,
Wow.
and like extremely price distorted oxygen tanks on marketplace too.
Mhm.
So obviously their family members could live in that's or to exploit price gouge essentially.
Yeah, 'cause if
Get it,
it's my
get it.
family member can't breathe, I'm gonna buy this
Yeah,
1,000 plus oxygen tank. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So get it through illegitimate means and go from there.
Mhm.
So those are some of the other problems. Then we had um, people in this was pretty bad actually, but we had people in we had people in Dubai um, selling like their workers passports.
Oh,
So
no.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Like, what does that do? I guess I don't understand why?
So essentially, they have workers there from South Asian nations.
Oh,
Uh,
this is where they were taking their passports away from them so they couldn't leave, like, oh, okay, wow, and they were
and then
selling
they
their passports.
exchange the passports with each other to
Wow.
basically sell workers to each other.
Oh my gosh. And they
Yeah,
put that on Facebook.
yeah. If you're gonna be a
That is
criminal, be a
crazy.
better criminal.
I'm like, if you're gonna be a criminal mastermind, Facebook is
Yeah,
not it.
do it better.
Wow. Yeah, well, I'm glad
Yeah,
y'all were able to locate it, but that's wild. Oh, wow.
yeah. So yeah. So like those are like the challenge. The challenge is essentially um, when it comes to it, it's less about the technical infrastructure. It's less about
Mhm.
I mean, it's definitely part about the business, but it's about people are going to use platforms um, to do people things. That can be a
Okay,
good
yeah.
thing. That can be a bad thing. Behind
Right.
every zero and one, there is a story. There's a human on the other side,
Mhm.
and those are the problems that you need to solve.
Yeah, that's so real. And then I love how you say behind every zero and one, because as we think about coding, a lot of times folks are like, it's the numbers or it's this, but no, those are human lives behind that. So I'm glad that you all are thinking about that. And it kind of gets to my next question. So, and it gets into the real human, even more human than what we were just talking about. Like during your time there, you played a significant role in reducing human drug and weapon trafficking. what were the key strategies you employed, and what do you think were some of the most crucial factors in your team's success? Because a
So
lot of times, honestly, I forgot that even Facebook could be used for stuff like this.
yeah, so for sure. So essentially, what you want to do for these use cases like human trafficking, drugs,
Mm-hmm.
weapons less so, but human trafficking, drugs is it's extremely low prevalence.
Mm.
So it doesn't exist a lot. So people don't report it a
Right.
lot. So therefore, you don't
All
get a
right.
lot of data. So because you
Okay.
don't get a lot of data, your classifiers are going to have a hard time detecting that content.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one part of it that's actually extremely difficult to solve. And one way to solve it is having unit tests. So essentially having your
Okay.
own synthetic data that you're going to cross check, be like, oh, I just deployed a new model. Does it
Mm-hmm.
pass the prostitution use case? Does it pass
Mm.
the passport use case? Does it pass this use case? Does it pass that use case? So you can just try to basically red team your own product a bit there. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing you can that's for detection purposes. But the other thing you can
Okay.
do now, which I'm pretty excited about actually, is generative AI for low prevalence
Mm.
use cases.
Okay.
Because essentially, right, when you talk to ChatGPT, you can ask it, what is human trafficking, right? Now, how
Yeah.
could you leverage that technology and ask it,
Mm.
what is does this content seem like a human trafficking violation to you,
Oh wow.
right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
now you've gone down from maybe 100,000 examples to train your own neural network to maybe only
Mm-hmm.
needing 1,000 to
Wow.
or to train your own ChatGPT equivalent, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
actually OpenAI only used. So the way that OpenAI did it
Mm-hmm.
is essentially there's two aspects to it. So the one they had, and this is honestly this is I'm a little frustrated. I was thinking about building my own course for this, but I'm not going to since it's too much work. But hopefully, listen to this podcast and you'll get a better idea on how this works. But essentially,
Right.
what they did was they built these things called transformers,
Mm-hmm.
and in all transformers really do is they are looking at your inputs. So let's take an example. Let's take a book. Okay,
Okay.
let's say that there is a word in the book that you don't understand, and that
Mm-hmm.
word in the book is exacerbate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
let's and you don't understand it, so maybe you'll what did your second grade or third grade reading teacher say? Look ahead, look backward, and see if you can get context
Yep.
clues. That's all
Mm-hmm.
the transformers are doing, is they're looking forward and they're looking backward, which is why a lot of them say bidirectional. And
Mm-hmm.
they're looking at both what's the input and the output. So like the forward part of it and the next part of it and the previous part of it. And all they're really doing is they're assigning weights to the inputs and the outputs. So they're trying to understand is what terms make exacerbate look like that or are important to understanding the context of exacerbate and what
Mm-hmm.
terms are not important to understanding that. So once you have this transformer network or once you have these weights, essentially it's very good at constructing human grammar, and
Mm-hmm.
it's essentially it's very good at predicting your next sentence because maybe it's like,
Right.
oh, Talha is, and it's going to predict podcasting or
Right.
recording, because it has context of other times Talha is has come up, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the most likely term. It predicts the most likely next token. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how that part of it works. Now, how do you turn that into a chatbot? So what it
Right.
does there is there's this what OpenAI did was it gave 52,000 samples. So the 52,000 samples were essentially questions and
Mm-hmm.
answers. So it was, where's the Eiffel Tower, right? And it will give you Paris, or how do I build a skyscraper? I'm looking outside New
Mm-hmm.
York. That's why I said that. And then it'll give you and then I'll give you something based, and then this is all human labeled, by the way. The humans wrote the answers
Ah.
to these
Okay.
52K answers.
Mm-hmm.
So they took that and then they fed that into this transformer network that I talked about earlier. And it
Right.
basically learned how to it used the internet. So basically the data set that was used to teach the transformer network, the internet, was the internet. They scraped all of the
Mm-hmm.
internet and it learned human grammar really well. And then it was fine-tuned to learn how to answer questions very well. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how
Mm-hmm.
that works. So now imagine you're using something that really understands how to answer questions very well, or
Oh
understands how
yeah.
the grammar of internet very well, and can then you leverage that to detect content. That's how I'm thinking about it right now.
You gave the best explanation of OpenAI I think I've ever heard in my life.
I,
Like
I,
the how you broke it down. You broke it down the way that's like literally step by step. So thank you so much for that. That was masterful. So I really
I thank
appreciate
you,
it.
appreciate that. I missed one part. I'll just go into it for
Oh, go
context.
for it.
So once you took that 52K examples and you made it super and you fine-tuned it to answer specific questions,
Hmm.
then they sent it out to for reinforcement learning. Now,
Yeah.
reinforcement learning has existed for a while, and I think a really good example of this is in chess. It beat Kasparov in
Oh
'92.
yeah.
So,
Hmm.
or maybe not '92. I don't remember what.
It was something. I
It
can't
was
remember what
something.
year, but
Yeah,
it
yeah, but
was it beat it won.
it won Gary. It beat Gary Kasparov, who was the best chess player at the time. But
Right.
essentially, yeah. So essentially, what it does is it it throws. It's like basically you're playing a video game. Um, you're putting like the AI in a video game and you're rewarding it for
Hmm.
certain behaviors and you're punishing it for certain behaviors. So now think of yourself
Mm.
when you play Mario is
Yep.
when the first time you play Mario, um, is you run into a Goomba and you're like, oh, that kills me. I can't do that
Yeah.
again.
Don't do it
Right?
again. Exactly.
Now
Yep.
do it again. Exactly. So now it's like now you do it again and you learn to jump over it, and then when you hit the goalpost, you feel like a good reward, right? So
Hmm.
essentially what that's doing is it took those questions and answers and it sent them to human labelers, and then the human
Ah.
labelers were and then it generated a bunch of different responses because you can
Hmm.
throw in a random seed and then it'll generate different responses. So after it generates
Okay.
the different responses, the human labelers chose the best one.
Got it. Okay. Makes
So then
sense.
it was rewarded for making better, quote unquote, better answers. Now, who's to
Hmm.
decide what is better, right? But that's also
Right.
beside the point. So, or what it probably did was made like more lengthy answers. But anyways, so then so the humans chose which one they liked the best, and they did this for a bit.
Hmm.
So after they did this for a bit, then they released it to us in what is now known as ChatGPT.
I love it. That is again, I'm not saying this lightly. That's the best explanation I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you.
Random aside, like so when GPT-3 was out, one of my colleagues, he has an AI woman of color. And at the time she was using GPT-3, just the system they had, because he had early access to it through OpenAI. And her voice is trained on my voice. So to double down on the AI side of things, there's an AI trained on AI's voice, the human AI's voice. But even like as we were talking about it when GPT-3 was out, we never really talked about it in the way you just did. And I think it's really good for the audience to hear, because even I've talked about this topic before and I was not able to break it down the way you just did. So I just want to say kudos and thank you, because I think it really helps folks understand and also makes folks not feel scared of it as much. Because a lot of people are nervous of those tools. Granted, I'm pretty sure in our future questions, you're going to make us scared in a second. But for right now, as far as explaining it, I feel good about where we're going. Sorry,
No, I
audience. I know where
appreciate
the
that.
questions are going.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I give long-winded answers. I don't know what to tell
No,
you,
no,
but I'm
no. That
also
was help.
like,
That was
no,
super helpful.
it's very cool that you have a trained AI in the system too, though, according to your voice. I was going to ask you, how do you? I don't know if you voice train or not, but I do not have a radio voice. I don't even know if I
I
have a
don't either.
podcaster's voice. But
Nowadays, I'm not trained on radio either or any of that stuff. I just like to talk. I don't like to hear myself talk, but I do like to talk and like share ideas with folks. But no, I'm not that hip.
yeah, I'm glad I'm not editing this episode. So
No, you're gonna be this part. I'll edit out as we like talk for a second. But no, you're doing very well, and this is super helpful. I think because you don't hear yourself, I hear it is good, so we're good.
okay, cool. Appreciate
I'm
that.
not concerned. I'm If I was concerned, I would tell you I'm good to go.
Okay, cool.
um, so thinking about that, right? So how do these experiences inform your approach to championing responsive innovation and testing AI clarifier? Excuse me. Repeat that. How do these experiences inform your approach to championing responsible innovation and testing AI classifiers for bias?
So I think I went over earlier where we can introduce
Hmm.
bias into these systems.
Oh yeah.
The thing is with these I'll go into GPT for a second because I think that's like the most accessible example for most people,
Yeah.
or even Midjourney or any of the AI art
Oh
tools.
yeah, more people are starting to interact with
Yeah,
those.
yeah. So what you'll see for those is if you type in female model or male model, most of the time it'll probably be a white person in there, or if you type in elf or something of the sort, it'll most likely be a white person
Oh
that ends
yeah.
up there.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of reasons for this, but I think what it really, and there's a really good book out by Meredith Broussard,
Okay.
who is a professor at NYU, and it's called More Than a Glitch. She was just on our podcast
Mm,
too,
nice.
and yeah, so she's great, she's fantastic. But I think what it comes down to more than anything is there is this way of framing how developed a nation is, which is based on how complex their organizations are.
Hmm.
And if you can understand, and if that makes sense, then or like some like a nation's capacity to build and produce
Oh
is a
yeah.
function of how complex of an organization they can handle.
Hmm.
And you can really tell of how complex an organization is by how much writing they are using to communicate with each other. Because a
Hmm.
talk with a person is a one-to-one style of communication,
Oh
whereas
yeah.
in writing, it's a one-to-many. You can broadcast
Right.
information and you can digest
Hmm.
information, and you can use that information more easily. So I guess from my point in all of this is societies or graphs, I guess is a better way to do it, is essentially what it ends up being is a network. And the network is,
Hmm.
imagine each person, each human in the world is connected to their friends, their family. And graphs within the graph, there are like subgraphs
Okay.
that have power and have organizational complexity. And because they have
Hmm.
organizational complexity, they're going to write more and be on the internet more. And if you write
Yep.
more and are on the internet more, and you have the availability to be on the internet more, and the accessibility and the privilege to be on the internet more, you will have your voice represented more by these AIs because these AIs are trained on the
Yes.
internet. Therefore, they will be based on the voices that produce the internet. So
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
one factor. Then there's also a lot of billion different factors, right? So another one is like there's predictive policing.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's based on data that was it's based on data that was collected on policing behavior to predict who will be a next um, likely person to go to jail. And you get this report, very dystopian future where this ends up happening. And the worst part about that is that data assumed a bias when you collected it because that data didn't just
Exactly.
magically appear. That data happened because it reflects the real world. So you get
Hmm.
this weird system where you're reflecting the real world back into the internet and therefore into the AI. And then that bias then gets reflected back into you
Yep.
by the way that it's showcasing the giving you the information.
Hmm. One of the organizations I used to work for, part of did something similar, but at a different level. So I used to work in a stat program. So stat started in New York City, and they used to have a comp stat program. If anybody's ever watched The Wire, they would have those meetings where they're like targeting crime and using data to target crime. So a lot of the data that was used was like one, because they sat in places in New York where they knew there potentially was high crime, and then they kept feeding that data back into the system. Not going over a couple streets over where there's also crime happening, may not be the exact same crime because we know drug use is the same across all groups. But if
It
you're
is.
going over here on this block to get folks for drug usage, and then you're like, well, I'm going to predict drug usage, it's only going to show you the same places. So they actually called it cops on dots, and they would send cops to where the data was telling them to go. And it was such a biased system. Stop and frisk came out of it. Like a whole bunch of stuff like came out of that program. I worked on a state version of it in Maryland, and it
Mm,
was something where we really were like making sure like we're not looking at data in that way. Data had to be looked at totally differently. And we stayed at the state level. We didn't have to worry about the city level policing or anything like that. But still, it was always about we're collecting data from these agencies. The data is going to have bias in it. And so we have to really consider that. But it was interesting because they were literally doing exactly what you're just talking about. Like that happened in real life. So,
yeah,
and they were doing predictive policing
yeah,
for that very reason. So that is scary a bit. Um, But I think I want to talk about some of the implications of AI just based on where our conversation is going. What are some of the key aspects that you believe our listeners should be aware of, and how can they prepare for and adapt to these changes?
So I think what it really comes down to is it comes down to our relationship with each other, right? It comes down to
Mm,
humans are a social animal. I think if you have a bunch of individuals, you group them together, you make a society. If how they exchange goods and services with each other or build them together, that's the economy. Now, how
right.
they distribute power with each other, that's the government. And the
Mm-hmm.
medium in how people communicate with each other and building together, that's where technology comes in. It can supercharge the economy, it can destroy it. It doesn't matter. It's any
That's so
type of
true.
interface that can, like a book is a certain piece of technology, right? When the
Mm-hmm.
Gutenberg press was invented, um, before that, there used to be monasteries, and monasteries used to copy and paste the books to each other, and that changed the way that religion, that's led to the Protestant Reformation, right? So
Right. Yeah.
um, right. So we're also at this new revolution. There was the telegraphs before that, right? Telegraphs. You had this platform, and it changed the way that militaries communicated with each other. You had
Mm-hmm.
the telephone, and then you had like the internet. It's the internet in of itself also happened, and then
Oh yeah.
obviously in 2008 you had the iPhone, and what I like to there's multiple ways to think about this. So I think one way to think about it is the business side of things. So in business, what you'll probably get is you'll get like a few competitors in the platform space. So in when the smartphone revolution, you have the iPhone, you have Android, and the rest of the world, not really the US. You have Android, you have
And in some of the world was only the first one.
yeah, 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 sure. um, and then you have apps, and then you have these creators that leverage these platforms. So you'll have Facebook, Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
DoorDash, Uber, Lyft that leverage these platforms, and then that's how they. It's like a gold rush for space on the new platform. You had
All
something
right. Yep.
similar with like VHS, right? With VHS, you had the few companies that made the VHS, and you had all the different creators that would go on to VHS, like Disney. Maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
not really, you don't think of them as a creator, but
But they were.
maybe, sure.
We bought something from them.
Oh yeah, sure, exactly. So they're a creator, and then you have um, AI, and I think what's more important than even generative AI is how AI is affecting us now. Is you
Mm-hmm.
have social media, which is an extreme version of AI where you have the algorithmic part of it, which means
Mm-hmm.
that it recommends things to you, so that you can stay on it as long as possible. And then you have
And it does
uh,
a very good job of that.
it does a very good job of that. I think the average usage is insane, right? For
It's
TikTok
ridiculous.
especially. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have another part of it, which is um, what do you call it? Like targeting you to like sell the most personalized ads possible.
Mm-hmm.
So my maybe question or challenge for the audience is what is your relationship with social media, which is a technology that inherently wants to addict you,
Yeah.
but it's difficult, right? Because it's changed the way we make have friendships now. We
Oh
have
yeah.
family WhatsApp groups, and that's a way that a family can feel connected with each other. Um, you feel like you have to be part of this infinite scroll to find content to be a funny person when you send reels and TikToks to friends. And
So
if you
true.
don't participate in these cultures, you're essentially excluded from society. So,
Oh yeah.
inherently, what you have to end up doing is you have to end up spending 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day scrolling so that you can be part of society. And there's something fundamentally wrong about that.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Yeah. I was actually dealing with this personally. So I put a timer on my phone so that all my apps that I am addicted to, I only have an hour limit. So across socials, hour limit period, and then across, because I'm a mobile gamer and I'm addicted, and I already know that about myself. So I put a hour mobile gaming limit as well. But then there's times where I've been like, I'm getting rid of my Facebook, I'm going off the grid. And you're right, because people are like, didn't you see that I posted that on Facebook? I'm like, I don't live on Facebook, so I
Yeah,
can't see every life moment. Send me a text. I can learn about you that way too, or call me, right?
yeah,
Folks,
yeah,
and I've been guilty of it. We post stuff on these platforms, and we expect folks to interact with us there, and that's where they should receive information about who we are as people. So that human piece is very interesting and also very scary. With that being said, I want to shift us into the GPT-3 AI art Web3 conversation.
mhm,
So, how do you see the landscape of technology disruption and evolving? And what are some of the challenges and opportunities that these developments present for both individuals and society as a whole? You already started to get into it, in that
yeah,
social media controls us at a level that we should never have let happen.
yeah. So I think this was interesting, right? This is on some level, it the we can go into generative art. I think generative art is it's pretty cool, right? Like you put in a few
Yeah.
words and it'll write whatever you want. And even for podcast promotion, I use generative art on LinkedIn, and it like makes like an eye piece. It's like, why
Oh,
is
yeah.
hugging Biden on this thing? Or what is this like? Is this a Library of Alexandria? Like, what is going? Especially for someone who has no art skills as myself, right?
Right. I feel you.
So that's one part of it. I think it's a very exciting field. I do think there is an exploitative aspect for it, though, which is that
Hmm.
the artists that put their pictures up are essentially they were used for their art was used for trading data without their consent. And I
Right.
think that is problematic. And I think
Hmm.
what's something that's even more problematic is that the way that Midjourney or DALL-E maps knows how your text goes to an image is the accessibility text online. So for
Hmm.
people that don't
Hmm.
know, accessibility text is on a lot of pictures on the internet for people that can't see well or can't see well. Um, there's text describing what the image is, and that text is scraped by AI companies to map to understand what the text is and then how to make an image out of that. So I have a mixed relationship with generative art. I hope in the future and really want to advance this discourse that we can do this in a way that puts the artists at center
Yeah.
instead of the platforms at center.
Hmm.
And the way
That's
that, yeah, go for it.
no, go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna say is that when what's going to probably end up happening again for any technology related disruption is you'll have a few tools that creators will use, like Midjourney, DALL-E, and they'll have their specific niches, and then you'll have
Hmm.
lots of creators using those tools, and those creators will probably go on TikTok. And
Hmm.
something I'm very scared about is specifically for the modeling industry is how this will be used. So Levi made an announcement that they were going
I
to
saw
use,
that.
yep, they were going to use AI generated models for especially particularly to hit their diversity quotas. Um,
Right.
so I have a I have a lot of qualms with a lot of things, as you can probably
Hmm.
tell.
No, I'm right there
um,
with you on that.
Yeah, with modeling in general is, or like the whole influencer culture in general is
It's
optimized.
weird.
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird. And I think modeling is weird to begin with. But the solution
Hmm.
isn't to outsource models, and particularly models of color that have been marginalized to begin with.
Exactly.
Especially because modeling it affects our preference, modeling slash media affects our preferences, and then
Definitely does.
our preferences affect the amount of power that people exhibit
Hmm.
in everyday life.
Mm, that is so true. Because when I saw the Levi thing, I was so irritated, and I think I've written about this on LinkedIn a few times at this point. But it's like you can't find a Asian, Indian woman, or what have you, and you went and created her as an AI. Like that just is weird to me in so many different levels. And then I think she was like a younger person too. So I'm like, a population that has billions of people in the world, you decided to create a technology instead of actually hiring someone and giving them a job. And I've seen the same issue even with like one of the first AI models. I think she was a Black AI model or African AI model. And then you find out who the creators are behind these avatars or AI. And often they're not people that look like the folks who are creating them. So they're not even able to benefit off the AI model within their culture, is someone else altogether.
Yeah,
And I
this is
know,
a
oh,
weird
go ahead.
system of like, oh, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you.
You do it. Mm-mm.
No, yeah, so it's just like a weird system, and I think like a very interesting solution was with Nigeria. I don't think they, um, I don't think this is caught up through generative AI. But I remember we're reading that they banned foreign models completely. They,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, and I feel like that's healthy. I don't have
I
an
know what you mean. Yep.
articulation. Yeah, I don't have an articulation as to why I think it's healthy. But honestly, if you go to any foreign nation, especially in the Middle East or in South Asia, you'll see a lot of models are white, even though 99.999% of people are
Yes.
not. Um,
Hmm.
and that's problematic.
It is, because it then tries to state, it makes it seem like beauty is a certain thing, and then people think and chase beauty in that way. And I know we're closing up and we're at near time, but I want to ask you one last question that I ask everybody, and I want to hear from you on this one for sure. So we touched on AI, technology, and their implications on society today. Why do you think it's essential for our listeners to understand the impact of AI and related technology on their lives, and how can they stay informed and engaged in these conversations? Also, any words of wisdom, totally give those to us as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of mystery surrounding AI, and there's a lot of
Mm,
mystery surrounding technology in general. But at the end of the day, for example, when you're building a bridge, right, from one part to the other, you not everyone in the decision process has to be an engineer.
that's true.
The only thing that the engineers are doing is design, or they're not even designing it actually. That's the architects, but
Right.
is understanding the how the load stress goes, where to build the
Hmm.
columns, where to build this, and they can definitely put out proposals. And there's nothing inherently wrong with putting out proposals. But at the end of the
Hmm.
day, we have a community process that takes in collective input from the different stakeholders. And the different
Hmm.
stakeholders are the people that are living at the different bases of the bridge. They are the people that live in that jurisdiction. They are the
Right.
people that would be affected positively or negatively by that bridge. And you don't have
Right.
to have an experience building a bridge to have input there. It's not a prerequisite. And likewise, I don't
Hmm.
think you need to have experience in AI to have you don't need to have that experience on how AI works to have an opinion on it. And
Mm.
anyone that has different backgrounds is even more likely to benefit from hearing these conversations because they are a weaker node in our system, not weaker as in they don't have power, but I don't have as many connections to them. And they
Right.
can help spread the message of this is what AI is, and it's not scary to understand, but its implications can be scary. And we can work together on solving this problem.
I love it. And I love that bridge analogy. And I think that's an amazing way to wrap us up today. Where can folks find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing? I'll make sure to drop your podcast in the show notes as well. But where can our audience find you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, which is kind of lame, but whatever, it's
It's
fine.
not. I'm more active there. That's my new space.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I just ah, I cringe at myself too from this, but it's just a place where there's a lot of eyeballs and not a lot of content. So you
Yes.
can look,
Same.
yeah, so you can look at for me at Talha Baig, Talha space Baig Baig, and I'm the guy with like the surfer icon, which I initially put to spot stop bots, but it ended up just being a brand. So then I stuck with it.
I love it.
So why not? So yeah, I co-produce and co-host the Trust in Tech podcast, and we get other people in the integrity field. And integrity are the people that are working behind the scenes on these tech platforms, or in academia, or the entrepreneurs that also run these trust and safety teams or trust and safety companies. And we talk to each other. We try to learn from each other. We have debates with each other, and really we try to we try to make the world a better place, one Socratic dialogue at a time.
I love it. Thank you so much, Talha, for coming to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.